When do we play the Giants? That'll be it.
The town meeting regarding the Rawson Road? No.
Our agenda's posted right there.
Well, where would that town meeting? Oh, no.
I think it's next week is the town board. I could be incorrect, though.
Yep. So I'll cross the names off then.
Thanks. It's all right. It doesn't Good evening. This is Zoning Board of Appeals. Let's start with the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag
America,
to the
the
republic,
republic for which it stands,
one nation,
nation, under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
All right, a few housekeeping matters before we get started. As exits are right here on the sides, right and left, and also out in the back, and one of the doors you probably came in. Restrooms are in the lobby area. If you haven't done so already, please sign the attendance sheet. Also in the back, there are proposed resolutions, along with business cards in the back of the table, with phone numbers for the planning department. If you would, please turn off your cell phones or silence them. If you have any conversations that need to occur that do not pertain to the present application, then please take it out in the hall so as not to disturb the presentation. If you have any exhibits that you want to talk about, if they've already been presented, they should come up on the screen. If you don't see it, just ask Susie over there and we'll try and get it up for you as quick as we can. If there's new exhibits, let us know it's a new exhibit. We'll certainly take a look at it and we'll mark it and keep it in our file. When you're talking about an exhibit, do your very best to use descriptive language. Compass directions, north, south, east, and west. Do your best not to say, well, if you see over here and see over there, it makes it hard for Amber over here. When we are now reading the minutes, it's hard to interpret what over here and over there means. So use structures or roads or anything that you can to use again, descriptive language. When we are asking a question, if you would be so kind as not to talk over us, and we will do the same. Again, we would like to create a solid and good record. Any questions along the way, feel free to ask. We'll do our very best to answer them. Okay, next, we have approval of minutes we need to take care of. The September 5th, 2023. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to review them. If so, I would entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Thank you, Alexis. A second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Leah. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay. So first on board is the mobile graphics application.
Good evening.
Good evening.
For the record, I'm Jim Bonsignor from Woods Oviatt on behalf of the applicant. Not too much else to report this evening. Though I think we kind of fleshed out all the major issues at the last meeting. The only thing to mention tonight, after speaking with the town attorney after the last meeting with respect to the question of use of the building, there was a question of whether or not we're going to divide it and basically have portion of it remain the personal storage in keeping with the existing building on site, or if the entirety of the building was going to be used for the business purposes. If the board is so inclined to allow us the potential use of the full building for future business purposes, we would absolutely love that. But we understand that, we had the discussion about splitting the use at the last meeting. That issue kind of came up in terms of whether or not we would need to come back for future, future visit to this board in that regard. So to the extent the board is willing to grant us the potential use of the entirety of the new building for the business use, we would like to request that. Otherwise, I think we're fine with the fallback position that we discussed at the last meeting, which is that portion would be reserved for the personal use and the one bay reserved for the business.
Right. What I would like to do is allow the board to ask some questions from just for a quick review, really, I think what we're primarily looking at, well, there's three pieces. The two additional employees, the permitting the showroom, display room, whatever we're going to call that, but then the additional building. I think hopefully it's a given. There's going to be a demolition of the existing building, which is about 2,400 square feet. And the new building is now approximately, I think it's 3,840 square feet. So it's an additional 1,400 square feet.
That's correct.
Your client is requesting then the full use of the building. And what I saw there in the email was for storage/use. And I think it's worth the board asking some questions on, putting some, if you will, definition, some clarity on what it is that will be used for. So if that's okay, then we'll
Certainly.
some questions. Fred, do you have any questions about the full use of that building now being used for the business for storage use?
No, I even think it's a good idea to have one common use.
Okay, Matt, questions?
Is it one or the other, or is it, does your client prefer it to be up to a certain percentage of personal use and flex business use into that section? Or is it, are you asking for no personal use, 100% business use from now moving forward?
I think the intent is 100% business use, but at this time, if they don't have a need for it, they would still want to be able to, throw some of the things that were in the old building in the new building. And then to the extent that they needed to use that space, for a second bay to do vehicle applications of graphics or something like that, that they would be able to remove the personal belongings and then use that space for the
So
business
it's,
purpose.
maybe like a mix, I'm just trying to figure out how we would say it. Is it a mix, is it a third of the
I think
building?
that was the original intention, but after speaking with the board and speaking with the board attorney, he suggested that we request that we be able to use the entirety of the building for business purposes.
But how much for personal? That's what I was, because it sounded like sometimes you might want to
Yeah,
have
I
a
guess-
corner or a bay be for personal use. I'm okay, I'm just trying to define like.
Yeah,
what
I guess
is
it would be more like what you suggested in terms of like a flex use. Put it this way, if they have 1,000 square feet of personal items in the building now, and I'm just making up numbers just for the sake of discussion. For now, if they could move that 1,000 square foot of personal belongings, et cetera, into the building and use that, and then use the remainder of the building for the business purposes, great.
So it's like, if we said up to 1,000 square feet of the building can be used for personal storage use? Is
Well,
that-
I just threw that number out there just for,
Yeah, and I'm just trying to, I'm just
Yeah.
trying to get at what the number is. That's all. Like, how would we, what do we want what does your client want the code to say? Is it up to a certain percentage of the building or certain square footage or?
yeah, I mean, I guess I'm not quite sure. I think
Because the way it was proposed, I think it was a third.
there's a
right?
third, which would be roughly what?
1,200
square
Square feet
feet.
or something. So
give
if it
or-
was
give or take.
up to 1,200 square feet can be used for personal space.
I think it was 2/3 from what I understood
There's
last
two-
time.
yeah, it
for
was the other way
personal
The
around.
other way around, okay.
Yeah,
So I don't mean to interrupt, but just the way I kind of, the takeaway from last meeting was that 2/3 of the building is to be put towards personal storage at this point in time, 1/3 toward business use, meaning storage/installation. And that you didn't want it written into the variance that 2/3 of it has to be for personal use and 1/3 has to be for business use. You just want it to be allowed in the use variance to have the space, period, so that in the future, you can remove some of the space that's being used for personal use right now to possibly use for business use, et cetera.
that sums it up perfectly.
Okay, sorry.
I still don't think we said the size. So no more than 2/3 of the building for
About
business
2/3.
use, for personal use.
Yeah, no more than
I'm
that.
good.
And then if God willing, their business expands and they need a second bay, then they move their stuff out and they move, another bay in for the business. And that way, we'd be able to utilize the full building even if they don't necessarily need the entirety of that space
I
at this
think
time.
the way the building is architected, is there a wall in between the two sections, or is it?
Plan to, yeah.
No questions, further questions?
Alexis, more questions?
When this started, though, on the original application, the personal use seemed to just be the apartments and the rest was for business use, was the way I understand it. Was that always the way that it had been intended in the application, or at the beginning? The building was just supposed to be business use, and then somewhere along the road it changed to be 2/3 personal, or was it always supposed to be
I think the.
2/3 and 1/3?
Well, the original intent was to replace the existing building, which has personal storage in it, with the new building, but then have the ability to use the new building for the business if necessary. So I don't think anything is particularly changed in terms of the application, other than removing the originally proposed apartments. So the proposed use hasn't changed. It was intended to replace the one building with a newer, bigger building with the ability to use it for business if necessary.
The original building was like 7,500 square feet. It was like twice the size.
Yeah.
The originally proposed building with the apartments? Yes. Yeah, so we drastically reduced the size by removing the apartments and trying to minimize the request.
On the personal use, is there, I guess a few members of the board have already brought up on the business use, expanding it, putting in a new building, begging the question of have we outgrown the space as a business, et cetera. But on the personal use, it seems almost have we outgrown the space? Do we just need to build a shed in our home or get ourselves a personal storage unit? I don't know if that's been, discussed.
Well, any person who owns their own business space can store their personal belongings in there. I don't think that is ever really a question. The space is there, it stores their personal belongings now,
Yeah.
and the building is not in the greatest of shape. The intent was to replace that building for essentially the same purpose, but have the ability to use it for the business down the road if necessary.
But we've made this now a business lot, so to say. So if we're just expanding the business portion of it, we could have the building 1/3 of the size, have it, be 1/3 of the size and just have it for business, where the business is located.
I understand what you're saying, but
Yeah.
again, we're replacing an existing building on the site with a slightly larger new building. What's going in it is,
Yeah.
to the extent that it's not expanding
Yeah.
the business, they're not going to be putting machinery or anything in the new space. It's solely going to be, storage and like I mentioned earlier, vehicle graphic application so that they can utilize the interior space of the existing shop a lot more efficiently. So I guess I'm not quite sure what the question is. So the use of the existing from one building to the other really isn't changing. We just need the ability to be able to use that space down the road for additional business purposes.
But it is changing if you're asking for a use variance. No, before it was just personal because it used to be the home was on the lot. Now it's no longer the home. We've gone full business with a small section that's personal because it was existing beforehand. And then when they did the use variance, they added, to allow that as a personal space. And now you're asking us to change the use variance again to allow for this new building, but only 1/3 of it is going to be for business, when we've kind of made the argument the whole way coming up to now that this is all for we need this for the business to expand, which I totally understand, but then it seems like are we overgrowing then with this, 3,000, yes, it's smaller than 7,000 square feet, but does it need to be 3,000 square feet if we're not actually using all of it for the intended purpose of the lot, which is business?
Well, I disagree with your position. The existing approval allows for the other building for personal storage use. So to the extent that, regardless of whatever the square footage is of the new building, they're still entitled to have a building and utilize that space for personal storage if they weren't under the terms of the existing approval. So what we're doing is expanding the building by approximately 1,200, 1,500 square feet. But the ask is that if we need to go beyond that, that we'd be able to in that same building without having to come back to the board.
That was for a previous building. So it was approved for a previous building. Now you're asking for a new building.
I think we're kind of splitting hairs here. They have an existing storage building on site. We're proposing a new storage building on site. It's literally moving things 200 feet from one space to another.
And making it bigger to use for business use.
Yes.
I don't have any other questions at this point.
Leah, questions?
No questions.
Fred?
No.
All right, I think collectively what I'm gathering here is, to your point, your clients were already permitted to use both the existing building that's going to be demolished, the 2421, for personal use. So
That's
if they were to knock it down and build one for 2421, they could still use it for personal use.
Correct.
I mean, I'm not expecting the board to accept it, but that's your argument that you're making.
That's correct.
Okay. So the additional 1,419 is now for business use.
That's correct.
Okay. So on that argument, and I think you know as well as I do in the board, that we are charged with granting a minimal modification. And really the minimal piece is this 1,400, not the 3,840. What I'd like to know, though, is with the use, the business use, I have a concern that if that business use is for storage, and it's limited storage, is as I look at the prior use variance, it talks about no additional manufacturing operations, and I think you know, it's paragraph 5 of the June 2006. So if it's for storage and not for manufacturing, and some of that new building is being used for personal items, we're not expecting our code enforcement officer to be poking his or her nose in there saying, oh, no, you can't do that. But if it starts to turn into a manufacturing operation, now it's significantly larger than what the manufacturing production is that's already going on in there. I think arguably then that would have an impact on the community. So if the board approves this, is your client comfortable enough that saying that in that facility, in that extra building, new building, no production, it's just storage, and I don't know how production, creating things that you currently do, it's just, what is it being used for?
Okay.
Be as minimal as you can. If it's just for storage, business stuff, then great. If it's not, then tell us what it is.
Chris Bailey, 650 Old Dutch Road, Victor, for the record. I think it's back to basics because it's been a little while since I've approached the board with our original intent, minus the apartments. Obviously, that was, the first step. But the intent was our production shop now is tight because of our storage of our material. We have racks 12, 16-foot high with 4x8 sheets of material, and I'm running out of room, and we're actually storing material on the floor. So my intent is to move the material over to the new building. We have to cover the storage that was in our previous building, but we need it taller because of the racks that we're moving over. Moving the racks over floors up a little more free space so we can keep the production in the production shop. I do not have an issue with the board saying no production as far as equipment stuff, but we do want installation because that's another big part of the traffic area in our building. We have a big open place and we have to leave that open so that we can bring in the vehicles to do the sticker installations and stuff on them. So what I'm looking for is to move material, 4x8 sheets and stuff that take up a lot of room, material-wise, and then a bay that we can bring a vehicle in and do our work. And that frees up 1,000 square feet, just doing that move to our production facility.
All right, so installation, in layman's terms, is you are applying your product graphics onto vehicles.
Correct.
Is there anything else other than, when we're calling installation, applying your graphics onto vehicles?
Is there anything else? What?
Beyond, what I'm trying to understand is, if production occurs in the current building, you make your product, you make your labels onto the graphics and things that go onto vehicles and signage. That's fair enough to call production?
Yes.
All right. Is anything like that going to occur then in the new building? I think it's an installation, when you put the things that you produce onto the vehicle. But beyond that, is there anything that looks or sounds like production that you would like to have occur in the new building?
Besides vehicle installation and storage of materials, there'll be a fork truck that will probably be stationed over there going between the buildings to bring back material. Production-wise, it would be not a good move for us to do production over there because we'd have to move our people back and forth, and that's not an intent. When you do a vehicle, you're there for a while, sometimes days, doing this installation, and that's why when it takes up the bay, even our big issue is now, when material does come, we have to move a vehicle that we're working on out of the way to bring in material, and that disrupts our whole installation. And in the wintertime, it's even way worse, trying to do a vehicle wrap, take it outside, get snow all over it, and bring it back in just because we don't have room. So moving the material out and doing the installs over there gives us our area that we require to move forward.
So, I hesitate to call it a print shop, but it's a high-end print shop. You're making graphics for any number of applications, right?
Correct.
What I'm concerned about is your business grows so big and you say, wow, we now to go, if you will, invade the new building and put printers, however big that they are, I haven't seen it, into that new building, and now you're printing in both locations. I think that arguably could change the character of the neighborhood, when you were telling us, I think in good faith, that we just need storage. We're doing so well, we need places to put this stuff.
I agree with you with that statement, and I'm willing to have the restriction placed for as long as I can do the vehicle installs, storage, and vehicle installation. That's our intent.
You don't see any change in shipping, delivery, how your operation looks. I know you get products delivered to you. If the board approves this, do you foresee an increase in deliveries?
I don't, because usually our deliveries are light, and they can just stack on the pallet when we order anything in bulk.
All right, so shipping both ways, your deliveries and, what's the term when it goes out?
I don't know.
Deliveries,
Export,
you send it out, your work output.
Yeah.
So you don't see any change in the commercial traffic that's going to be in and out of your
No, because a
facility?
lot of our growth is with our existing clients, so it's been good in that respect. And besides UPS, FedEx, your normal stop that comes in every day, whether we have one package or 20 packages, that's primarily how we ship things out. So it's really no difference in, if we have 20 packages for UPS or one, that would be the difference, but that's still one trip for that driver.
Okay, thank you, that helps. So let me ask the board if you have questions or comments about if the board decides to grant the modification of the use variance, as one of the conditions being that that new facility will only be used for storage and/or installation, no matter if they use a third of it or 50% of it, or however much they are using for their business. I mean, I think that's one hurdle, and then the others, if they decide to use the entire piece for business use, is that going to make a difference? Or if they put personal things in there. I don't think the personal piece is really in play. I think, to me, in play is how much of that space are you going to use for your business? And
Right.
what's it going to look like, and is it going to impact the community?
As James alluded to, we didn't have a lot of consideration about that until the town attorney said that could be a tricky thing. Definitely if we trade hands with someone and it's written that way in code, or we have to come back to the board, so he thought it would be wise not to separate it like that, so.
And that, I think, also leads me into exactly, it's going to run with the land. So if we put that condition in there saying it's only for storage and/or installation, if we don't put that in there, you sell it, someone that's going to say, wow, I can produce in both buildings.
Right.
I think that's going to be a problem for the community. Fred, comments, questions about that piece?
No, I think it's getting the words so well discussed. Very good application.
It is, and use variances are rarely granted, and I think taking the time and thoroughly looking at this is what we're here for, and I think we're doing a great job of it. So, Matt, questions, comments about that piece?
No, my only comment is I actually think the combining of the barn and the building is a net positive for the community. I think if we just had them leave the barn to store and then add a 1,400 or 1,500 square foot building, I think the site would be, well, it'd be less compliant than it is today, right? By building a new building and kind of getting rid of the older one, I think it creates a better situation for the overall picture there. I'm okay with, the full use of the building for installation and storage. I'm not against that.
Great. Alexis, questions, comments?
If we write into the variance that the full building can be used for business use, is 2 additional employees going to be enough? Is my question, because 2 employees were supposed to kind of substitute for the 2 of you. If then you have almost installations going in all 3, storage in 1, installations in 2, are you gonna have to come back here and ask for more employees? Or, should you sell? You guys don't count on those employees, but, you sell to somebody who's single and they want to replace, husband-wife combo with 1 more employee. That'll be them. Is 2 enough, I guess, is my question.
Yes, ideally, we would hopefully welcome another couple people down the road. If I do have to come back to the board each time, I'm welcoming to that, because I think the board is going to receive that well with no complaints, and, we're trying to have a little growth there, and if you don't see a change in circumstance with what we're doing up there, then I would perceive that the board would allow us to add those 2 employees. So it's not a extreme concern of mine, but if we want to talk about opening up the gate a little bit more to 4 or 5, that gives me an opportunity to, bring in more people, but I also know the board is trying to limit what goes on in the use, but a couple employees is really a vehicle with 1 trip, so, that would be ultimately, hopefully helpful, but we do not have that intent on our radar right now.
I think if we change that number now, then it's going to stall your project. We have to put it back on notice
Okay.
and reapply it. I think that's,
I'm comfortable with 2.
unless you think, I think that's a rabbit hole, I don't think your clients want to go down right now.
No, again, the primary purpose is to address a spatial need right now. And by opening up that space, it gives a little bit more room for those employees to work on production in the main building or work on installation while the existing employees work on production. Again, with the restriction that the new building be limited to storage and installation, I don't think there's going to be any issue with the employees at this time.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Great. Leah, other questions, comments?
The only comment I have is I feel comfortable with you hiring no more than 2 employees. And the way I'm looking at it, that would limit to the amount of production or work you can do in that extra building. because between the 7 and 9 employees, there's only so much work you can do, because you're keeping a set number of hours, and they can only, even if you got more work, if you're only limited to those 7 to 9 employees, you can only finish so much in a day with that one bay and with who you have. So that was only my comment, just I was doing the math and the numbers, and I felt comfortable with that.
Adam, what's the trigger for a sprinkler system in a building that has employees working in it?
I'm pretty sure we're well below, but I'll verify that.
Okay, all right. Because what you're referring to, it now it's really, storage is one thing, but if you're going to do installation, it can't be installed by itself. So employees got to be there. You need time to look at that? Or are you relatively confident that we're under?
I
they're
think
under?
the town code requires sprinklers in any commercial building, regardless of the fire code, so,
Okay,
but the planning board can, they can go for a waiver,
Okay,
I believe.
all right,
Or
so
they would
that's-
come here for that, correct, the zoning board?
the sprinkler waiver.
Right.
I thought we talked about this earlier. Do you plan on putting a sprinkler system in the building? I thought that came up the original, for the code. Yeah, I thought you had answered yes.
My plan is if I have to. I didn't really think about that yet. My goal was to get a building. If I need a sprinkler system, that's not going to stop getting a building. As far as storage and things like that, yeah, insurance, but the sprinkler system I think is needed in my current building. I'm not sure it would be as needed, because the people aren't going to be as deep in the building, and it won't be so spread around.
I thought it was any commercial. I mean, we've had to get variances for people that wanted a shed.
Yeah,
Or,
any commercial building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
so
you need
think-
one unless you-
I was in expectation that it was required,
Okay,
so.
all right. Anyone from the public want to speak for or against the application? All right, so just a quick, if you will, a poll straw. 2 extra employees, permitting the showroom, display room, and the additional building of 3,840 square feet to be used for personal and business use, with the condition that it's for storage and/or installation, and not production. Fred, you're okay with that? I mean, we'll put more details into it, but just to give
Sure.
them an.
No, that's good.
Matt,
Yeah, I'm good.
Alexis?
Yep.
Leah?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, we'll keep going forward. What we need to do, there is, what we caused, or we triggered the, what was it, seeker, we needed the assessment form. Did you have a chance to look at that?
The part 2?
Yeah.
Or the one that was?
Yeah, it's a negative deck, we got to read it, so it's good news for your client. As I'm looking at the form being filled out, number 1, will the proposed action create a material conflict with an adopted land use plan or zoning regulations? It's been checked off as no. Number 2, will the proposed action result in a change in the use or intensity of the use of the land? No. 3, will the proposed action impair the character or quality of the existing community? No. Will the proposed action have an impact on the environmental characteristics that cause the establishment of the critical environmental area, CEA? No. Will the proposed action result in an adverse change in the existing level of traffic or affect existing infrastructure for mass transit, biking, or walkway? No. Will the proposed action cause an increase in the use of energy and it fails to incorporate reasonably available energy conservation or renewable energy opportunities? No. 7, will the proposed action impact existing A, public-private water supplies, B, public-private wastewater treatment utilities? Both of those are no. 8, will the proposed action impair the character or quality of important historic, archaeological, architectural, or aesthetic resources? No. 9, will the proposed action result in an adverse change in natural resources? No. 10, will the proposed action result in an increase in the potential for erosion, flooding, or drainage problems? No. 11, will the proposed action create a hazard to environmental resources or human health? No. Board good with that? Any questions? Good. So I've done that. Oops. All right, so those two pieces done. Now, what I'd like to do is we have the conditions, the original conditions back in 2006. And I think it's a good idea to go through those conditions and determine whether or not they apply or it's a modification. So what I'm looking at is the resolution, June 6, 2006. The conditions, number 1, that a maximum number of employees not to exceed 7 employees. So if it's granted, it will then be 9 for an additional 2. So that condition doesn't apply anymore if the board grants it. Agreed? Board, yes? If you do-
Modified.
It's going to be modified. Number 2, that no full-size tractor-trailer trucks, either delivery, raw materials, or pickup of finished product from the site. I'm not hearing anything about tractor-trailers being on site. You're talking about FedEx trucks and UPS trucks, but no tractor-trailers there. Agreed? All right, so we're going to leave that one in there. 3, that all exterior lighting be restricted to security lighting only and be in compliance with the Town of Victor draft illumination. And there's an attachment. We've already talked about that. That's staying in there. We're agreed? Board? Yes. The no signage either on the building or freestanding is permitted. We're all in agreement with that. That stays. 5, that the Zoning Board of Appeals requires a 3-year review of the operation by the Code Enforcement Office to ensure that there has been no additional manufacturing operations or increase in intensity of use that was described in the testimony given by the applicant. But I think there's 2 pieces to that. I think the Code Enforcement Officer can go in there anytime he or she wants and make sure that the use variance is in, the applicant is being in compliance with the use variance. So having the 3-year review, I don't think is necessary to have that as a trigger. We're in agreement with that?
Yep.
But
Go ahead.
wouldn't the 3-year review keep it so that even if they're not going in every once in a while, just on their own, they go in every 3 years?
I think whether it be a board, a resident, or somebody that says, look, there's a lot going on over there. So to go in after 6 months or 2 years, or whatever the time is, to do an inspection to make sure that they're in compliance with it, I think it's like anybody else that asks for a use or an area variance, more so a use variance. If you want to leave it in there, I suppose we could. I don't have any huge objection to it, just whether or not it's necessary.
So Mike, if there's a complaint or a suspicion, like the 3-year requirement doesn't prevent code enforcement from investigating at any given time. I think when this was established, that was just the time frame for their formal go in, make sure they have the same amount of equipment and that the intensity of the operation wasn't growing. But I don't think that this inhibits the code enforcement officer from checking whenever they, see fit. So the zoning board may want to decide if the 3 years is the right increment, or if you want it to be, every 2 years, every 5 years, as a formal report on the use variance.
Because without a complaint, you really can't. It's not like you can just show up and say, I want to come into your site and.
Well, no, there's a use
compliance.
variance, so we could, check.
If it says it in the use variance, but I mean, it's,
But if no one's complained in 3 years, why go?
Then leave it in there. If
Yeah, I
it's,
think
if
we
it's
should.
going to help the code enforcement officer have some reason to say, oh, it's time to go check and make sure everything is as they say it's going to be, then leave it in there.
Especially if it gets sold.
Didn't-
Whoever owns it next might not
Didn't
follow the
code
same rules.
suggest it comes off? Adam, was there a document that said to take this off?
No, I had asked the zoning board just to consider, like, if they were necessary, meaning, like, should they be reworded? I mean, the intensity of the use is increasing by adding another building, in my opinion, right? So, as I was reading it, I was like, well, this seems kind of irrelevant at this time. Maybe it needs to be reworded, not necessarily removed.
Well, it's kind of naive to think we can sit here and say when it's necessary to make an inspection.
You do it every year, you can do it every 3 years, you can do it 5 years. There,
3 seem like it's worked. How many years has it been? It's been,
It's been almost 20,
yeah.
17 years already at this point.
Have we been going in there every 3 years?
Yes.
and I-
Do you feel like that's
Approximately.
working? Right, I mean, is that sufficient?
What's that?
You feel like that's been sufficient?
Yeah, I think that the 3-year, and then the next one kind of plays into that.
right.
With the inventory of equipment, and basically, those two conditions were added just to monitor the intensity of their operation.
I think for a use variance, I think it's worthwhile to have something in there, some review to make sure everything is on the same page and they're doing what they say they're going to do.
Because
and-
again, I think without it, you need a complaint to go in there.
Okay, all right, we'll leave them in there. So we talked about 6. Number 7, that if the proposed operation lapses for a period of 1 continuous year, the use variance would permanently expire and the property would revert back to the current zoning. And I think that should be in there unless somebody disagrees with that. 8, the Architectural Review Committee review and approve the proposed building elevations.
That's history.
Yeah, that's already happened. So that 8 doesn't need to be in there.
Should we
Go ahead.
move that to findings of fact instead? Like previously it did that, or just negate it altogether?
Well, we don't have a findings of fact that that has happened,
Okay.
but it's presumed that since that building is there, that the existing building, that it's been done. 9, the hours of operation for the full contingent employees be limited to 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I don't see any reason why to change that. All right. Before we move on, questions, comments, concerns?
So we're modifying 2 or 3 and adding 3 conditions.
We're modifying 1, so that's going to be not to exceed 9. Agreed? So it's going to go from 7 to 9,
Yeah,
and everything else still applies.
okay.
And then you're gonna add a condition on, which I think you've already stated, the
Right,
use of the full square footage of the building for.
right. So as now, when we go through the proposed resolution,
Mike,
yes,
just, so the showroom customer-friendly display area was in the original use variance as a finding of fact, as part of their testimony. It wasn't actually a condition. So do you want to add something into this modification that, I don't know if those findings of fact all go away, or if there's new findings of fact, or if we need to
No,
make
I-
a statement to that not being an issue anymore?
we can't, what we're doing by permitting the display showroom is modifying the prior use variance. So we can't cross that piece out. You can talk about the conditions, but I don't think you can alter a prior granted use variance. You can have a rule, regulation, a law that completely contradicts something that happened 10 years ago, and it's going to override that law that happened 10 years ago. And that's, in a flavor, that's what we're doing is by granting the showroom, display room, we're modifying that prior use variance.
So I guess that's my question, just as far as black and white goes. So 3 years from now, when I forget all this, or if a new code enforcement officer is assigned, when they look at the most current use variance resolution, will there be something, it just, that statement won't be a part of it in the new one, so it's no longer relevant?
What statement?
About the proposed use would consist of a production location only and would not contain a showroom or other customer-friendly display area and would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, I think that's one of the conditions that we're seeking to modify with this application. So that condition would be modified to say that, the production will be limited to the main building and that they will now be permitted to have a small display area, display counter, however you want to describe it, in that main building. I think that kind of goes to.
Yeah, so the gray area there, it's just, it was never a condition.
Yeah.
It was listed as part of their testimony as a finding of fact. So it was enforced because that's what they're, they have to adhere to their testimony for the use variance, right? So that's why I just want to clean it up so that it doesn't get misinterpreted in the future and that,
So wouldn't maybe we just remove the showroom piece so that it's just allowed? So there's no debate over whether it's a showroom or a retail space.
Well, there's nothing to it anyway.
What I want is there's three parts to the modification for a use variance. And what I'd like then regarding the showroom display room is to characterize it then as a modification of a prior prohibited use. So if that's worded as such, it then gives the indication that it wasn't permitted before, but we're going to allow it now.
I think that's a fair way to say it.
Then it's going to be current, and if somebody has a question about it or finds it later on, we've addressed it.
And that would be a de facto statement of fact this time around.
So three pieces to the, this is a modification of a prior use variance. One is to increase the number of employees from 7 to 9. Second part is permitting a showroom, display room, which is a modification of a prior prohibited use. And the third is the additional building of 3,840 square feet, which includes the demolition of an existing building of 2,421 square feet. And that the applicant, well, we can put that as far as the justification. All right, are we ready to proceed?
Yes.
So the justification then, as far as the first part, the applicant cannot realize a reasonable return.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
I apologize for interrupting, but I think you have to make the seeker determination first before you can,
We didn't do that? I thought we
We did that.
I think, do you have to take, I think you still have to take a vote on whether or not it
Okay,
would
so
be.
let's go back. I read the,
Sorry.
no, it's okay, thank you. The Part 2 impact assessment, so all those 11 sections that I read. And it needs to be determined that based on the information and analysis above, along with any supporting documentation, that the proposed action will not result in any significant adverse supplemental impacts. So a motion for approval,
A motion for approval?
second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Ready? Looking at the criteria that the applicant cannot realize a reasonable return provided by the lack of return is substantial as demonstrated by competent financial evidence. The applicant has provided sufficient information regarding the value of the property, that if it was to be used for residential, it's also near the I-90. And that, as we talked about at the last meeting, the September 5th meeting, that's already been discussed at great length. Any questions or comments before we continue with the second piece? The alleged hardship relating to the property in question is unique. It does not apply to a substantial portion of the district or neighborhood. Again, we've talked about that before at great length, and also looking at the prior use variance. So proceeding further, the third part is really, I think, at the issue. The requested use variance if granted will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. So 2 more employees arguably won't change the character of the neighborhood, and permitting the showroom display room, which is a modification of a prior prohibited use, will not change the character of the neighborhood. The demolition of the existing building and replacing it with a new one, an increased size of 1,419 square feet, the building in and of itself won't change the character of the neighborhood, and it's believed that, in fact, it will enhance the character of the neighborhood, since the building to be demolished is in poor condition. And the use of the building for business purposes will not be used for production. It will be used for storage and installation of graphic products on vehicles, for example. And there will be no change in the shipping or delivery of stored materials. And the new building will only, I already said that, right, on the, only for storage and the installation. Okay, so that's in there. Anything else you want to add for the third criteria? This would be part C.
Is it just installation on vehicles, or is there other installation you do on? Just vehicles?
Just vehicles.
I think the important piece on there, that there will not be production in the new building.
Agreed.
All right. The alleged difficulty has not been self-created. Expanding the building is a self-created issue. The building is growing, but the use of the building, again, as indicated earlier, is primarily for storage and for some installation. So it's arguably it is not self-created. Would anyone like to add anything to the criteria that we went through, or the conditions that we've established so far? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion for approval of the use variance modification.
I so move.
Fred, thank you, Alexis, for a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So carried. Thank you so much for your patience and working through it with us.
Likewise, we really appreciate your time.
Welcome, good luck to you.
Yeah. Congratulations on your daughter got married.
We can say I do now.
Thank you. It was a wedding, I'll say.
It was
that.
a
It was a good one, though.
250
Good.
people.
Oh, wow.
Good.
Go home, get some rest. Take care.
Right. All right, next is the Krupka application. And thank you for your patience. That was use variances take quite a bit of time, so I appreciate your patience with it. So you have an existing shed.
Yes, purchased this
And
summer.
it's, you need a variance, and it's 5 feet 9 from the property line, is that right?
At one point, it's 5'9" from the property line, and at another point, it's about 10 feet. It's on the north setback of the property, but the northeast side of the shed is 5'9" from the property line, and the northwest side is 10 feet from the property line,
Okay, so we're
1,600
going to,
square feet.
before you, I want to hear everything you got to say, whatever you want to say.
Yes.
The county planning board, we had to refer the case to the county planning board. Are you familiar with how that works? I could walk through it kind of quick with you and,
I heard of that it had to go through the county board, but I didn't understand the
okay.
rationale.
So what sometimes happens is, it seems lately, more times than not, that depending on the application and where it's located, and most of the time it's in proximity to whether it be a county road, a state road, a county line, a town line, there's a bunch of triggers that the county, the law says that the county has an opportunity to weigh in and give their 2 cents about how and if it would impact the county. And depending on that kind of impact, they're going to give their opinion about what they think we should do about it. And it also depends on what kind of class it falls into. Sometimes they may say, well, here's our 2 cents, vote however you want. Other times they may say, this is really important, and we're recommending a denial. If they recommend a denial, the board then has to vote in a majority plus 1. So since we're a body of 5, majority would be 3, plus 1 would be 4. Can't tell you what they're going to do because we haven't seen it yet. So we find some facts today, and then it's going to come back when?
So you'll be on county at October 11th, so you'll be back before us November 6th.
Right. So you'll get a chance to see it. We'll go over it with you. But until we figure out what it is that they have to say, we can tell you, we can't vote on it today. So, but we can get some facts. So with that in mind, if you have questions, let us know. But if present your application, we'd love to hear about it.
Oh,
Tell us about your project. What happened? Why is it there?
I'm sorry. Yeah, we purchased this Amish shed from a company up in Greece, and at the time that we saw other sheds very similar in our neighborhood, and we're not realizing that it was required to be permitted to be able to be installed on our property. It's in our fence line, so we were just basically misunderstood the requirement for the town. We had a pad installed, which was a a gravel pad with timber around it to support the 16 by 10 foot shed. And then when I spoke with a neighbor who asked about it, he asked about the permit, and that's when I didn't realize I needed one. That's when I came and got the permit, and they did the checking on it, and they confirmed that it's does not meet the 10-foot requirement from the property line. The property line is actually up against woods. There's about 40 to 50 foot of woods between my property and my neighbor's property. And he actually did send a a statement to the board to that effect. Corey stating that he had no issues with the location of the shed.
Fred, questions?
Suzie, there's a good picture of just the shed. Do you have that there?
I have a picture of the shed with, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I submitted it with my, the 5 questionnaire write-up.
well, you've got all the room in the world to put it properly. And there was the permit to build, the site plan permit showed it being 10 feet. And then when the code enforcement officer came back to see it as built, it's not, it's less than that.
It was actually a compliancy permit that I requested. I had already had it
Right.
installed at the time that I got
Right.
the permit.
Well,
And I was under
something
the,
happened to the 10 feet that was originally
it
on
was,
there.
it was assumed to be 10 feet because the line was not well marked, and was when I actually had it measured or marked out that it was determined that it was closer than 10 feet at that one, at the
I have a
northeast corner.
feeling this would be the first variance in that development. There hasn't been one there since I've been on it. So, you could have made it just 6 or 8 inches shorter. It came within the 150 square feet.
Yes, I wish we would have gotten one size smaller would
I
have been.
wish you had two.
We didn't know of the requirement.
And I wish you'd said, well, we don't have to have it right on the line. Let's shove it in a couple feet to be sure. That would take care of it nicely. Instead of that, you're looking at looking for a variance. So that's my comment. I don't actually have any questions. It's, as things go, it's portable.
What makes it less portable is the fact that it's on a pad that I spent $1,700 to have installed, and
Yeah, but it
we
would.
at the 4 feet would require the same cost that I had the pad installed to actually move it to a new location.
That didn't sound quite right to me, because all the materials are there.
They said that the materials were there, but the labor was the larger portion of the installation. And the fact that moving it 5 feet over would require completely taking everything up, putting it into a new location, and which would have a potentially different, it's at a slope as well, so it's not a flat area. So that's why there's 4 sections of timber on one end and 1 section on the other end to accommodate the slope. And because of that whole thing, that's why moving it is a little more involved than just the material. It's relabor again. Plus, the yard that would be exposed would need to be reseeded and refilled to accommodate where the pad is currently located. Plus the cost of moving the
This is pretty,
back in the shed.
this is pretty small for the county. I bet they just say, go ahead, return it to us.
Matt?
I mean, yeah, it would have been nice, right, if you
I
like,
absolutely
knew
would
where,
have done all
knew where
of
to
this
put
had
it.
I known it.
It helps, in my opinion, that all of your neighbors are for it. It's, you mentioned there's a good size, and I can see it, on Google Earth, like everybody else, there's a good sized buffer between you and your neighbor's okay with it. The variance is substantial that you're asking for, but I think given the situation and kind of the uniqueness of the lot and the buffering, and I was gonna ask the fence, is the fence, can you see through it, or is it a?
It's like a fence for a swimming pool,
I didn't even
but it's
see that.
4 feet instead of 5 feet.
Looks like a wrought iron fence.
Wrought iron.
It's aluminum,
Type it.
but it was I got the permit for the fence, because that I was aware of. I got the permit and went through the HOA and did
Well,
everything.
thank God.
So when I did the shed, as I said, it was a pre-built, and it was within the fence line, and that's why I made the poor assumption that since it was within the fence, I did not realize of the restriction.
Okay, no further questions.
Alexis?
No questions.
Leah?
And the fence that's in back of the shed, is that on the property line?
Yes.
Or that's?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, it is on the property line.
okay.
Or it's within the property line.
It can't be on it. It's
It's
gotta
within
be.
the property line.
It's within, yeah.
Yes.
be a-
Yeah, because the shed is about 1 foot in front of the fence, so the fence is about 4 feet from the property line
Okay,
at that point.
okay. When I drove by this morning, there were, I mean, there was a lot of woods between his property line and the neighbor. I mean, it was a lot.
About
You know,
40 to
that-
50 feet
yeah.
of woods between myself,
Yeah.
or between our line and the neighbor's
Yeah.
backyard.
And also my comment is, because you have the fence around even on the side, it's in back, you know, in back of the house, it's really not too visible from the street.
When I read the code after the fact, I realized that it said that in most areas of Victor, it would have only had to be 5 foot from the property line, but unfortunately, because I'm in a cluster, it had to be 10 feet.
No,
That's
the oth-
inaccurate, but.
It's the other way.
Yeah, it's the other way around. So you're in a clustered subdivision, which would allow you to put it 5 feet from the property line if you meet the 10 criteria. The problem is the shed you installed is 10 square feet too big.
It's
So-
10 square feet too big,
Right,
yes.
because code enforcement goes by the code, an area variance was required. So because you're 160 square feet, you're then required to be 10 foot from the property line, which is the approved setback for your subdivision, okay? The standard for Victor is 15 feet, but your subdivision has a side setback reduction to 10, and then that can be further reduced to 5 because it's a cluster subdivision, so long as your shed meets those 10 criteria. And because your shed's 160 and has a side length of 16 feet, it doesn't meet those 10 criteria, which is why you have to come for area variance, okay?
It's obvious that even though the drawing said 10 feet, there wasn't anything to be gained by the way it turned out. It's an accidental miscarriage somehow.
Yes.
The problem I have with these, and you're not the first one, that they build first and ask questions later. And then we hear, well, it's going to cost too much to move it. And the sympathy cords are being plucked. It's like, I know exactly what you're talking about on the timbers and the stone. For personal experience, I put the thing in, so I know it's labor intensive, and I saw the, I don't know, it was Mennonites or Amish, whatever the company was, that amazing how they got the shed on there in the first place. You know, these forklifts, I know it can be done. It's not so much the cost of picking the shed up and moving it. I agree with you, it's the cost of relocating the shed so it would be in compliance with the code. And to what end? Where it is it going to change the character of the neighborhood? Points have been making, it's well buffered, you can't see it from the road. Is it substantial? Probably yes. So we have to go through these balancing tests, if you will. The other concern I have is that we've had area variances for sheds. Almost seems like it happens once a month. And once one starts, then we hear well, my neighbor has one, my neighbor has one, my neighbor has one. And then there's this domino effect of, then it is going to start to change the character of the neighborhood. And it's hard to go back to say, well, lack of a better term, yours was an honest mistake. And someone else says, well, gee, I want to maximize my property, so I'm going to do like my neighbor did and push it as far as I possibly can so I can enjoy my full backyard because I get to do whatever I want with the property, which isn't true. So those are my comments. I'm not suggesting to vote for or against it. I'd like to hear what the county has to say. Anything else you want to ask or comment?
The only other comment was, we did consider an alternative area on the farther end, which would have been much further in the property, but then it gets close to some wetlands or some, not wetlands, but it's a an area that we weren't able
Conservation
to do it
easement.
near. So we were kind of, that's why we chose this corner, and obviously in retrospect, we would have brought it in further, gotten one size smaller. It was a combination, it was all the things that went the wrong way. One size smaller, 3 feet this way, 2 feet this way, all would have solved the problem, but it was just
would you be willing that, well, since we have to wait for the county, is for you to go to whomever you contacted and get an estimate, not a guesstimate, an estimate on how much is it going to cost to move that shed in some place that is compliant with the code, which means, picking the shed up, relocating those timbers, moving the gravel, all the labor that's involved with that. And I think it would be worthwhile for me, I think the board, to look at that in consideration for.
Maybe more than one price.
Okay, get at least two.
Okay.
All right, that would be helpful to get our arms around what really the impact is. Not only is it going to change the character of the neighborhood, but how is it impacting you on, can it be moved? Is there some ulterior, something that's feasible for complying with the code? All right, make sense?
Makes sense.
All right. I have to say it. Anyone from the public want to speak for or against the application? Okay, good.
Oh, one quick, sorry, how long has the shed been there?
It was installed, it was July,
Just-
middle of July.
So an option wouldn't be if you went back and said, hey, I just need one that's a foot smaller, would they do a swap for you? And then you'd be all done? Could it be that easy? I mean, just an idea, like,
I suspect, no, I've not checked to see if that's an option, but I would have to pay to have it shipped back and then get a new one built, and deal with restock
So it was-
charge or whatever it all would be. It's custom.
So it was truly custom built?
Oh, it was custom built.
Okay.
We requested a loft, a window, the colors, the vinyl, everything, so everything on it was custom built to our specs. So I did not check to see whether or not they would take it back, but I can
Who is-
certainly check that.
Who is the individual or entity that told you it was okay to put it there? Do you know?
Who told me it was okay to put it there?
Or is
No
it-
one said it was okay to, I said, I saw ones in the neighborhood and spoke to neighbors who have the sheds, but
All
I
right,
did
so
not.
you chose to put it.
Nobody said, oh, no, you don't need any, it was
Okay,
a bad
fair enough.
assumption on my part that I needed.
Thank you
that
for
I
your
did not
honesty
need a
on that
permit.
one. Great. Anything else from anyone on this application? Great. Then we're going to see you
November 6th.
November 6th. All right, and bring us some estimates. We'll take a look at it. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Great. You have a good evening. Thanks for your time. Please, thank you. Adam, anything for us?
Oh,
Anything else?
I think I saw that down the road here, right in the village, that there was a sign up for that gold exchange.
Oh, yes.
I think that Hayes might be moving into the village here.
I thought you were going to let me know that our individual that's on Dryer Road, he still has a covering. So he's still there. And then if you go further, I think it's east on Dryer,
You gotta
past,
quit going that way.
I'm sorry, that's how I go. On, just past School Street, there's one with 4 sides on it, in front of their house.
Okay.
So this would be, I think, in between School Street and Cork,
farther west.
on the south side of Dryer.
I got you.
Thank you. Anyone have anything else for Adam to do?
Remember the woman that was here 2 or 3 times with the shed? Pretty big one on Louise, Erica Trail and Louise. And she pleaded poverty a couple times. Well, they rebuilt the whole backyard. There's now a retaining wall that's, I don't know, tall as I am. Shed's gone. The whole backyard's been redone.
Yeah, the one where the shed was on the side of the house.
Yeah,
And they were on the
yeah.
corner.
Yeah.
Because we had to move, I don't think it passed, right? We had to move the shed, I think.
No, they withdrew.
Oh, they withdrew, was it?
Whatever suggestions we had that were too expensive, weren't too expensive for for what they did, because they were dropping 10, 20,000 on that.
All that landscaping was there during their application, Fred. It's been there for a couple of years.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I thought they had, it was like the wall and back, they were digging into it.
It was all there. That was what the issue was with them being able to move it to their backyard, is they had built that entire patio thing already. The definition of accessory structure in our code may need to change with the, there's a few things, these membrane structures for one, which, like that lid that the guy on Dryer has now, I'm real hard pressed to say that's anything other than,
A tent.
right. And then,
Probably listed on
shipping-
Airbnb for all you.
shipping containers, we now consider an accessory structure because it is built and they're starting to appear for some reason around town, so,
In place of a shed?
but I think that the walled membrane structure should be maybe integrated into our definitions.
All right. Very good.
Working on those
Does
sorts.
anyone have anything else?
Well, there are people living in them.
Oh, Fred's got a,
Fred, if there's, go ahead, Fred, run it.
Huh?
they were asking what the sheet was.
If there's something there you want to see the presentation on, circle it.
I like it all.
Fred will come to your
Yeah.
house and present.
Really?
Okay, is there anything else before the board, before I request an adjournment?
What's the sheet?
If there's a
Okay, I'll
topic
have
that you.
a motion to adjourn.
No, if there's a topic that you'd like, just circle it and give it to,
Give it to me. Fred's got a
Amber.
whole packet of stuff from a class he took. He wanted to provide an opportunity
you can take classes.
to
Go with it.
share that
Go
with
on,
all
why
of
don't
you. If you would like copies of things, just circle it and I'll copy them for you.
Yeah, what's this class?
What's this class? You can take classes, and you're supposed to take classes for, it's a requirement, 4 hours a year.
I thought we did our class already.
Speaking of that, did we ever figure out what happened to all the training that disappeared?
Training.
Remember the training that, like, some of us had like half of it done and then it just all disappeared?
Yes,
from the-
Tina, I'm not in HR. I don't know.
Deal.
You guys are all good for training because of that class for this year.
There we go.
Yeah. What if we want more?
You can, circle them.
Fred, let me know when you go.
Look her up, Fred.
He did. He already got the packet, but if there's a section,
All right, okay. Motion to adjourn.
a second, great, all in favor.
Aye.
Thanks so much. Have a great night.